السلام عليكم. Good evening. أنا اسمي دكتور ياسر عباسي، استشاري طب نفسي في مستشفى العمل للصحة النفسية. So my name is Dr. Yasser Abbasi. I'm a consultant psychiatrist and I'm the head of addiction services for Maudsley Health delivering services at Al-Amal Hospital. Good evening and welcome to a live and interactive session on the Ministry of Health and Prevention's Instagram live page. We thought we'll have a session today to discuss on how to keep safe and healthy during these challenging times. We're all going through a period of time we've never experienced before, and we are all trying to make sense of it. We're all trying to make sense of what's happening around us. We're all trying to make sense of the changes that we've seen in our lives, and we're trying to make sense of how we deal with it in the future. So this is again an interactive session. If you go on the Instagram page of Ministry of Health and Prevention, and I'm sure you're there and you're watching me live, underneath that you can send in questions or views and I can then discuss them further. But we'll kick off the session by just discussing a few things and outlining what I'm going to discuss today. I'll very slightly touch on the current pandemic of COVID-19 and what that means. I'm not going to go into a lot of details of that. I'm sure you've heard a lot from various sources. We will then touch slightly on how it's good to keep safe. What are the few things that you could do to make sure you keep yourself safe and your loved ones safe? And we'll then discuss some issues around mental health and mental health hygiene, how to look after yourself really, which is also very, very important. Okay, so again, if you have questions, please make sure you ask them in this interactive session so that we can take it at a pace that you like. This whole session is in English language, so it would be nice if the questions do also come in English language. We might not immediately answer the questions, but as we go along, we'll try and pick up as many questions as we can. So let's kick it off. I know we've all been talking about physical health and hand washing and hand sanitizing and making sure those frontline workers are wearing what we call PPEs, physical or personal protective equipment. And that is to safeguard those individuals who are coming across situations where they are more at risk of being exposed to the virus. What we seldom not talk about is the psychological PPE, is the personal protective things that we should be doing psychologically to keep our mental health at bay, to keep ourselves fit and healthy, and to also make sure that we acknowledge that we are all going through a difficult situation, a very challenging situation, a type of situation not many of us have seen before. So slightly in the beginning we discuss a bit about the virus. COVID-19 is spread via droplet infections. It's a SARS virus, a coronavirus, which has been going around the world. It's very easily spread through droplets, and that's why all these precautions are in place across the world. The precautions include washing your hands on a regular basis, sanitizing your hands, making sure you wear protective clothing, and covering your face with a mask so that these droplets from your body are not left on surfaces where it would increase the rate of infection. We are also, people are also stuck in their homes. Those who are working from home. Those who are not working are stuck at home and not able to go out as much as they used to. Some loved ones are away from other loved ones, stuck in another country. Some residents who would like to go back to the country cannot. Visitors are stuck in other countries. Some residents who are working in the UAE but are outside the UAE are stuck outside and are desperate to come back. And we're all locked in this situation where we really don't know what the future holds. But first, let's start going through some tips around what would be a useful way of making sure you're physically safe and you're taking the right precautions. So we've discussed about hand washing earlier on, and I'm sure you've heard lots of advice around making sure you wash your hands regularly whenever you expose yourself to the outside world, or when you go outside, when you come back home, you wash your hands for at least 20 to 25 seconds. You also try and sanitize your hands whenever possible, and make sure you wear a protective mask on your face whenever you go out. But making changes to our daily lives in terms of hygiene and our social behavior can be challenging, but can also help slow down the virus. It not only helps us, but it also helps other people. It also helps those who are vulnerable if they do contract the virus, and it is something that we're giving back to the society. So it's very important for you to understand, so that these precautions that you're taking are helping everyone, not only within the area that you live in, but also within the country and internationally, everyone. It is very important that we are able to work together, all work together, to slow down the impact of this pandemic, so that we can try and get back to our normal lives in a way which we're used to. But also we've got this opportunity to kind of think about what we used to do, how we used to do it, and whether we'd like to make changes now. There's so many things that we've discovered about ourselves, about our world during this time of lockdown that the world is going through, and what other things that we could like to take away from here, learning lessons, learning points that we would like to take away from this and use them in the future in our lives. As I said in the beginning, this is an interactive session, so please do make sure you ask questions so we take them on board and answer them. I'm sure you all have lots and lots of questions on your mind. One advice a lot of experts are giving individuals is, particularly for those who are going outside on a regular basis, frontline workers, individuals working in areas where they have to go out, and those individuals who are going out for other purposes, when they come back home, to make sure within your home you have kind of a buffer zone and a living zone. One of the advice around this from experts is, when you come back from the outside, in your shoes and in your clothing, you might be carrying some parts of the virus. So when you come back home, you have a buffer zone where you're able to take your shoes off, which do not come into the main living area, and if you can take off certain elements of your clothing which does not need to come into the house, and from there it goes directly into the laundry, which kind of keeps this difference between your living area, where it's not been exposed a lot to the outside, and the buffer area, which you keep a constant check on, and you are leaving your shoes or your slippers out there, which does not bring in the infection into the house. This not only gives you peace of mind, but also creates this difference where in your living area you feel more at ease. You don't feel too worried about spreading the infection to your loved ones, or you don't feel too worried about constantly cleaning the living area, because you know it's not been exposed as much to the outside world. So one thing that you can take away from this is trying to create this buffer zone and living zone within your home area, if you can, and if it's possible for you to do that. There's been a strong advice in some parts of the world where they insist that you should be wearing a mask. Again, there are lots of views on that, but most of the experts do suggest that wearing a mask is helpful in, again, slowing the spread of the virus, and it's also helpful in reducing the rate of the infection and the spread. It's very strongly advised that you do so whenever you do go out. You need to ensure that the mask that you wear, it's nicely fit on your face. There are many types of masks out there. A surgical mask, a normal surgical mask would do. A lot of people are buying single-use washable masks. Whichever you do, make sure it fits your face properly. It's covering your nose and it's up to your chin and covering the sides as well. This then reduces the droplets from going out to further afield when you end up sneezing or coughing. But when you come to think of it, we've gone through a time where we were quite carefree, going out without thinking quite a lot, to a point where we're constantly on the edge. We're constantly thinking about when life is going to get back to normal. We're constantly thinking about, well, am I infected? We're constantly thinking about, I am going out, but will I bring my infection? Will I bring an infection back to my home? Am I exposing my loved ones to this terrible infection? And that keeps us constantly alert. And our body, when it's exposed to some sort of fear or a challenge, goes into a fight and flight mode, where it's producing lots of adrenaline, and you feel alert, you feel constantly that you need to do something about it. You feel on the edge, you feel a bit anxious, and that constant level of anxiety can sometimes make you feel drained, make you feel more and more stressed. And if you're not feeling mentally well in yourself, if you're not feeling your best, if you're not at your 100%, then you might not be able to perform your best, do your best in what you do, and not look after the people that you want to. We will discuss a few simple strategies, possibly to try and unwind, try and understand what you can do, and making sure that you are not as anxious, you are not as stressed as you would feel with all this happening around you. This is again a live interactive session, so make sure you're sending your questions through. I will pick them up as we go along, and once they come to me, I'll start answering them as we go along. One of the most important tips I'd like to give you, and I think it's very important that everybody kind of takes that on board. I'm a bit guilty of that as well, and it is to ensure that you are not becoming overtly obsessed with the news around the pandemic. You're not constantly checking the news and trying to find out what is happening in the world, and what is happening around you, and what is happening in the country that you live in. One thing which is very important is we'd all like to keep up to date, and it is good to be up to date, but if you are very vigilant and constantly trying to look out for news and information, they'll keep you on the edge all the time. And if you continue to do that, it might raise your level of anxiety. So if you want to, maybe set some times in the morning and at night where you check updated information about the pandemic. If you can avoid it, that's great. You know where we are now. You don't need to be updated every day. But if you do feel you really need to know what's happening around the world and around where you live, then maybe set times during the day. Set a morning time and an afternoon time, or a morning time and a night time, where you just quickly check for 5 minutes, and set a time limit as well. So you're not going to check it for more than 5 to 10 minutes. You've got your update now, you'll move on. You don't need to be constantly looking over your news feed. We are all on social media at this time of our lives. Everybody is going to social media to look for news, and our news feed is constantly full of items which makes us anxious, and gives out all these different types of information, which sometimes is difficult to verify as well. So the other advice, apart from making sure you don't constantly keep on checking news is also making sure that you get your news from reliable sources. You're going to the right sources to get your news. You're not looking at some meme on a social media outlet, or you're not looking at a forwarded message or a recorded forwarded message which is trying to give out all sorts of messages out there. So you're going to a reliable source. For example, in the United Arab Emirates, you'd like to get your information from the Ministry of Health and Prevention, or from a reliable health authority. In other places, like from the US, you go to Center of Disease Control. In the United Kingdom, you would go to Public Health England, and Department of Health in Australia, and so on and so forth. So you're going to reliable sources. You go to the World Health Organization's website, and you get information from there. And with that information, you are more secure in knowing exactly what's happening, rather than looking at random news feeds or random voice messages or memes which are not really helpful in the first place, but are also not factual. There's a lot of information out there which is not based in fact. So it is very, very important that information which is absolutely right and based in fact is read and is forwarded. So not only are you checking your news feed about this infection at only selected times, but you're also going to reliable sources. I hope that makes sense, and it makes you understand the importance of it, but also how to cordon it off at different times of the day, rather than being exposed to it 24/7. With this connected world that we live in, I'm talking to you here on Instagram Live. You, I'm sure, are connected to the world with all the different social apps that you have. And so in this connected world, it is difficult to switch off because you're connected 24/7. During the night, you wake up, you look at your phone. In the morning, you wake up, you look at your phone. And never in human civilization have we been so connected. It is useful on many fronts, but it can have a detrimental effect as well, particularly at such a challenging time. So make sure you do it at selected times of the day. The second thing, and we've talked a lot about social media now, but the second thing I think which is very important for us to discuss is the fact that we have to recognize that your anxiety is completely normal. We have a pandemic at our hand. Half the world is shut down. We are changing the way we live. We are changing the way we behave. We are far away from our loved ones, and we don't see people on a regular basis. We look and meet up people on a regular basis, and we can't do that right now. And naturally, that will make you anxious. So it's all right to experience a bit of anxiety. Psychologists have there was a bit of a poor connection, so I do apologize if it was buffering or you missed out a bit of it. So I'll repeat slightly what I said in the last minute. We were talking about anxiety, how it's normal to feel anxious at this time, and how anxiety sometimes is a normal reaction of the body to recognize threats and to make sure that it helps us mentally and physically take measures to protect ourselves. So a bit of anxiety is useful. In fact, if you look at the evidence, it would suggest that if you look at the stress performance curve, if your stress keeps on increasing to a little bit, your performance also increases. And that's an important increase in performance, and that's an important increase in stress. So stress does make you perform. But there's a midpoint within that graph where when your stress goes beyond what you can handle, your performance goes to the peak and then starts coming down, and it starts your performance starts deteriorating. So stress can be useful to some extent, but when it goes beyond a point which you can handle, then it can be detrimental. What is the point? That point is very different for different people. So the level of anxiety or the stress that I can handle would be very different to the level of stress and anxiety that you can handle. And hence it is useful to make sure you check in with yourself and try and understand when you're struggling. The point when you're struggling is the point when you think you need to take some time off. How do you recognize that you're struggling? Well, you would recognize that you're not giving your 100%, or you're not able to perform the way you do in the daily chores of lives. You're also unable to talk to yourself in such a way which would make sense moving forward, implementing your daily routine. You also feel that it's affecting your daily activities. Your sleep gets affected, your mood gets affected, and anything that you normally do is getting affected. So that's the midpoint where you'd say, well, you know what, now is the time for me to do a self check-in, whereas my anxiety levels are going really, really high. So again, you need to really find distractions, and you need to make sure when you are getting to that point, how do you make sense of all this happening around you? Again, there are experts in within the field of psychology and psychiatry who would say you try and divide your problems and your worries into two different categories. One of the category would be problems that you can do something about. The other category is things that you can't do much about. So the things that you can do much about is your daily routine, is your own reaction, is how you spend your day, how you interact with others, how you would like to create a routine around yourself. The other things that you can't do or you can't have a handle on are things like we are all stuck in, like a pandemic affecting the whole world. You directly cannot influence much at that point in time. All you can do is wait and watch. But what you can control is your reactions. What you can control are your actions and your emotions. So it's very important for you to make sure you divide your worries and stresses in these two areas, and then you start working on them. So in those areas which you can change, you then start sitting down and deciding how you'd like to change them. I hope I'm not going too fast. We're trying to take it slowly. We've covered around the importance of your physical health and how to protect yourself. We've also touched a bit around your mental hygiene. We've also talked about your personal protection, psychological personal protection, which you need to have with you at all times at this point in time, where we're all going through very unprecedented events. We also get, I've touched on it slightly before, that we also get lots of news items and information out there, and sometimes that information is not really based in fact. So again, you need to make sure you're looking at things which are factual. There are reliable websites that you can go on, and I've picked up a few what they call myth busters from the World Health Organization website, and I'd like to go through just a few with you, so that you see the types of things that people believe in they're doing, and how reliable organizations are responding to that. So one of the first myth buster on the WHO website is very clearly stating there are currently no drugs licensed for the treatment or prevention of COVID-19. And that's very important to understand. There's been lots of news around this drug could be helpful and that drug could be helpful, but there's no evidence currently that there is a drug that is licensed to treat or prevent COVID-19. There are trials being done on hydroxychloroquine or remdesivir. There's some promising news coming out from some trials in the US around remdesivir, but as a scientist, as a doctor, I would say we have to still wait to make sure the full results are out for us to be able to use it in an appropriate and an evidence-based manner. There are also some trials going on around developing vaccines, which is also promising news. I know there's a trial going on in Oxford in the United Kingdom, which is looking at vaccines, which might have results around June and July to see whether it's useful or not. but waiting for a news to come out and then understanding what you can do is always the best way forward. I've seen lots of videos which suggest, I don't know, you put saline in your nose, or you spray, you take a hairdryer and put the air up your nose, and it will somehow get rid of COVID-19. Most of it is really based not in fact, unfortunately, and none of it has been known to be of any benefit at all. The other one, which I really found interesting on the website, was adding pepper to your soup or other meals does not prevent or cure COVID-19. You might laugh or smile at that, but the people who've been asking about this, whether if they add pepper to the meal or to the soup, will that help cure COVID-19? And it's important for you to understand that it will not. So you need to, again, be aware and go through reliable websites. And one question that a number of people have asked me as well is, can COVID-19 be transmitted through houseflies? Because it's a droplet infection, can houseflies carry them on them? Again, the evidence around that suggests that it cannot. So you don't need to worry about obsessively cleaning your house or making it airtight. You can't. We still all have to live and deal with the daily routines that we go through. So there's a certain amount of things that you would be exposed to, but taking precautions is very important. The fourth mythbuster advice on the WHO website was drinking methanol, ethanol, or bleach does not prevent or cure COVID-19 and can be extremely dangerous. I would say I would strongly trust advice coming out from the World Health Organization, and hence trying to avoid any of this would be very useful. There was never any evidence around this, and I don't think there ever will be evidence around this. The last, which again I'd like to touch on as a mythbuster, is this rumor that I've read on multiple social media outlets, and a lot of people have forwarded messages to me, is that somehow coronavirus being associated with mobile technology, particularly the new generation of mobile technology. Again, there's no scientific evidence whatsoever to link it with such a thing. It is an infection. It is it is a viral infection. We've had similar outbreaks in the past. We've had a Spanish flu outbreak in the early 20th century. They took almost similar measures to what we're doing now. And it's important to understand an infection is spread in physiological manner. So thinking that a mobile tower can spread infection is neither physiologically or medically possible. So humanity has faced this before. We've all faced this before as human beings in different ways. We've done it. We've faced challenges individually, and we've come out of it. We will all come out of it as well. It's just making sure we hang in there and understand that we're all in it together. We're all going through it together. You're not the only one there. We're all there, and we're all going through this difficult time and trying to work together to help each other out. I would again remind you, this is a live session, and if you continue to send your questions to us, we're collating it, we're collecting it, and I will get them as time goes by, and then I'll try and answer them as we go along. Some advice now around how to take care of your mind, the psychological PP that I was talking about, how to take care of your mind and how to make sure you're looking after yourself during this time. Everyone is affected by this, by being stuck at home. By being stuck at home, you end up not following your normal routine. You're not waking up at the time that you think you normally would. You're not driving in a car, going to an office, and going through a routine that you would normally do that. So when people are stuck at home and working at home, you avoid using terminologies like, oh, I'm stuck at home, which I've used a few times there. What you do is you identify the positives of it. you suggest to yourself that you're with your family now. You're spending more time with your family, which is something that we don't often get. But also the fact that you're working in an environment which is very familiar to you. You should keep your regular routine. If you used to wake up at 7, then continue to wake up at 7. If you woke up at other times, then you wake up at the time that is more suitable for you. But keep your routine. It's absolutely essential you keep your routine. You limit your exposure, as I've mentioned earlier, to news media, and go only at specific times to reliable news media. Keep yourself busy in the things that you normally do. If you were busy in things that you were involved in on the outside, then try and see what you can do within your home or within the setting that you're in, and how you can dwell on positive thoughts. So the positive thoughts would be how you feel what you have, and how important it is for you to realize the things which do make an important priority in your life, and re-evaluate your focus and where you'd like to focus at in your life, and see what you'd like to do with that focus. You want to make sure that you're not setting unrealistic goals. I've seen a number of people who are saying, well, if I'm stuck at home, I'm going to do this and that. Don't try and change the world by staying at home. Try and do things which are doable. I've always advised people to make sure they sit down, wake up in the day. If they don't have anything set up goals during that day, and at the end of that day, see if they've been able to achieve those goals. Don't go out on a limb trying to think you would achieve something which you've always thought of in this short period of time. Make sure you put in the goals there, and check in every night before you go to bed whether you've been able to complete those tasks. And if you've been able to complete your daily routine tasks, like waking up, giving breakfast to the family, helping the children with their schooling, doing some work from home, getting all the chores done at home, is more than enough. You've done quite a lot. Well done. Pat yourself at the back and say, I've done quite a lot. And move on and try and look at and focus on the next day. Take each day as it comes. If you think too much far ahead, then you start creating more anxieties within yourself. And you, because it is so unpredictable at the moment, no one would know the real answer. So focus on each day as it comes with some element of planning. And do not be harsh on yourself. Do not judge yourself too harshly. One thing we sometimes do as human beings, or sometimes people within our surrounding do, is guilt shame us, saying, "Oh, you've got a house, you've got meals, you've got a meal on your table. What are you complaining about?" And sometimes guilt shaming doesn't really help us. Sometimes we feel anxious, sometimes we feel low, sometimes we feel depressed, and trying to find a reason why we feel depressed takes us into this vicious cycle of feeling more low, because we're saying, well, why am I depressed? I don't need to be depressed. Why am I feeling like this? I've got everything. And that guilt shaming kind of makes you go into a cycle. So you focus on the fact that, well, it's all right. I accept I'm feeling anxious. I accept that I'm in difficult times. There might be not a reason why I feel depressed. Why should I feel depressed? I don't know. But I am feeling depressed, or I am feeling anxious. I accept that. And I need to now focus on the positives. I need to focus on what I'm achieving. I need to focus on what I've achieved. And make sure, at the end of the day, the most important bit, you give yourself, if not a lot of time, at least 10 to 15 minutes to yourself. You take yourself away from the environment that you're in, if you are with a lot of people in your home, and give yourself 10 to 15 minutes self-check-in. Sit down, do some breathing exercise, do some mindfulness exercises, or just simply sit down and check that you're all right. Check with yourself if you're all right. You have been going through quite a lot at the moment. We have all been going through quite a lot at the moment. We've been worried about so many things. We've been worried about our family stuck in other places, or our family becoming unwell. Just check in with yourself and think, well, I am all right. I know it's a difficult time, but I'm here, I'm alive, I'm well, and I'm trying to do my best and the things I'm trying to do is to the best of my ability. Okay, we'll try to see if there are any questions that are coming through, and I will check here. Okay, so we've got a number of questions here. I will try and go through them in order. There's a question which right at the beginning is asking me how to overcome worries. We've touched on a number of different ways of addressing that, but it's a very valid question, and this is something that everybody is worrying about. How to overcome our worries, and then you're worrying about how to overcome worry and adding another worry to your worry, if that makes sense. So you don't try too hard to overcome your worries. The more you push yourself, the more you are trying to find an answer, the more stress you're putting on yourself, the more you're adding to your worries. As I said in the earlier part of the session, accept the fact that it's all right to be anxious. It's okay. I feel anxious many times during the day. I feel anxious at so many points during this pandemic. There's so many things that I was planning are now so unpredictable. I don't know what's going to happen. But you take each day as it comes. You take each day as it comes. Try and get through the day. And if you've got through the day, you've done really well. You need to sit down again and make sure you check in with yourself and say to yourself, you've done really well. I've got through the day. It's been a difficult day, but I've got through it. So well done. The second question I have here is, sitting at home puts us under huge pressure. What's the solution? And again, there's no magic bullet or an answer which will resolve all your worries in one go. We are in very unprecedented times. We're all going through things that we've never experienced before in this way. We're all seeing things in our news outlets, in our social media outlets, which is making us even more stressed. Sometimes being in a house with all your household all together for such a long time itself is full of its own pressures. And as I said earlier, I think a few things which are very useful is to check in with yourself at the end of the day. Make sure you give yourself at least 10 to 15 minutes away from all this. You've also to realize that you're sitting at home, but which might, to some people, might seem, well, if you're sitting at home, maybe you'll be more productive at work, which might not be the real case, because you are sitting at home, you are working from home, but yet there are all the other pressures that at home which should have normally not been there but are there now. Children being at home, or doing schooling from home, or looking after your parents while you're sitting at home. All of those aspects are not there in normal times, which you are exposed to now. So be realistic with your goals. Be realistic with your goal. There is another question which is asking me, has there been any cases in children with inflammatory reaction like there is now in Europe? Again, as I said, make sure you're kind of going to reliable sources. There have been inflammatory cases from reactions from some cases in Europe. That's correct, but I'm not the right source to give you this information, as I'm not working in the front line of directly managing COVID-19 in acute hospitals. But to my knowledge, we have not come across any of that cases within published material in this country, in the UAE, at this point in time. Doesn't mean to say we might not see that in the future, but as far as I am aware, we haven't. But it is again very important to keep in touch with the official website of the Ministry of Health and Prevention, which will give you the right information, which is verified and is also evidence-based. How to stay calm and balanced psychologically for a long time. And again, you can see the anxiety in that question as well. How to do things for a long time. is even during the most predictable times, different days are unpredictable. So you can plan certain things, you can look at various measures that you might want to put in, but there is always some element of unpredictability in life, and to try and find the balance for a long time is in itself a challenge. But what you do is you find your own niche, you find your own way of dealing with the stress and anxiety. So people who feel people who are, for example, if someone's feeling anxious, you kind of find out your own triggers. What does trigger? And this is for you to think about, and this is how you will come to your own conclusion, your own bespoke plan. You think, what triggers my anxiety? What is it that makes me very anxious? Once you go into this highly stressed mode or anxious mode, you kind of sit down and think, what made me go into that? What was the trigger? Could I have avoided that trigger? If I couldn't have avoided that trigger, could I have responded differently? If I couldn't have responded differently, could I have taken myself away from that environment so that I would have not been exposed, I would have not exposed myself to that particular trigger? And identifying that for yourself is more important than anything else. Then after that, you develop a bespoke coping mechanism, a healthy coping mechanism. Lots of people tend to move towards different things which are not conducive to the health. For example, I've known a couple of people who started smoking more, and they think they're dealing with anxiety in that way, and possibly they are. But if you look at the risk and benefit, smoking too much is outweighing the benefit of it helping you with your stress. So particularly nowadays, if you're smoking too much, you're putting more stress on your lungs, and if you are putting more stress on your lungs, then you are making yourself more prone to the negative outcomes of the COVID-19 infection. So smoking is not really a positive coping mechanism. You need to develop and find out your own coping mechanism. For some people, just again sitting down and having a warm glass of milk is a coping mechanism. For others, it's going for a walk. If they can't go for a walk because of the restrictions nowadays, it's for them to make sure they engage in exercise. One thing which is very important, which I did not mention in the first half of the talk, was keeping your physical activity going on. We normally move around quite a lot during the day, and if you're working from home and your children are schooling from home and you're not going out, then your physical activity comes down to almost nil. But what you need to do is be aware of that as well. Eat healthy. Make sure you're aware that you need to take your vegetables and your fruits. Keep yourself physically active. You don't have to go out on a run if you can't. You don't have to go to some fancy gym to keep yourself active. There are many apps, there are videos on YouTube, there are many ways in which you can keep active within your home. If you can't do nothing, you just stand in a place and you walk around within your house environment. There was a very old captain in the United Kingdom, Captain Tom Moore. He's very old, 99, 100 years old maybe. His birthday is just recently, and he's had a hip fracture and everything. And he wanted to be a bit active. He wanted to do something for the health service over there. And he said, I'll do 100 rounds of the yard, a very small courtyard that he had outside his own. And he wanted to gather money for charity. He wanted to, I think, target £5,000 or something. He's managed to raise £30 million because people liked his effort so much. So all he did was walk around his yard. If you have a yard, walk around that. If you don't have a yard, you walk around within your home environment. Make sure you're physically active. Make sure you're aware how much activity you're doing, and you're keeping up with that. The penultimate question I have here is it possible to declare antidepressants without a prescription? I'm assuming they're trying to ask, is it possible to get antidepressants without a prescription? Well, the strategies which I've explained to you are all self-coping mechanisms, self-coping strategies. which you will try and put in place to try and deal with the anxieties that you have, try and deal with the various stresses that you're going through. If you feel you've got to a point where you are finding it difficult to cope, you've put all these mechanisms in place, you've done all you can, and you're still feeling very anxious, and you're still feeling very low in your mood, then possibly that's the point where you think you need help. And all these symptoms, all this anxiety, constant anxiety, or low mood, or your sleep being affected, or your diet being affected, and you're not taking interest in your daily routine and your daily life, if all that is going on consistently for 2 weeks or more, that is the point where you think, well, that is the point where you should seek help. Not think, but you should seek help. If you want antidepressants, then it is strongly advised that you have a discussion with a health professional, preferably a doctor, who will then be able to guide you what is the best possible way of going forth and getting treated. Over here at Al-Amal Hospital, there's a confidential service which you can call in and seek advice. You can also have appointments with qualified professional psychiatrists over here who will be able to give you professional advice around your mental health problems. Al-Amal has launched telepsychiatry, keeping in mind the current challenges that we're going through, and we're rapidly expanding the remit of telepsychiatry. So you don't even have to attend. You can see a professional through a particular online software where they can see you through a camera and talk to you and assess you and decide, and also then prescribe you if need be. I think it is very important to understand that sometimes a pill is not the answer or is not a cure for all the problems. It won't be able to take away the anxieties that you're facing. So changing your thought process, changing your cognitions, as we call it, the thought process, and how you see things, how we evaluate things, and how we look at situations. So if you perceive a situation to be very dramatic or very drastic, try and reevaluate it. Try and see if you can see it from a different angle, and if it's something that you can try and change in the way you look at things. So working with your thoughts, and also if you do need help, make sure you seek help. It's highly strongly advised, don't start self-medicating. If you think you're coming to a point where you need medication, seek professional help. Seek professional help and get in touch. The more questions are coming through. Thank you very much again. Thank you for making it interactive. We've got some more time left, another 10 minutes roughly. So please do send in your questions. We will constantly try and address them and answer them. So one question is, should we stop watching coronavirus news? I think I've kind of partially answered that. Yes and no. It's entirely up to you. It is good to be updated to some extent to understand if your routine or if your work is linked up with what's happening, then you would like to be updated, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong. But overtly watching it, constantly watching it, being around it 24/7 is definitely not useful, definitely not healthy. If you think you can stop watching the news and that's helpful, then there's nothing wrong in that. If that works for you, I think you should do that. You will eventually get an update from somewhere and from some source. But what you need to know is you need to be aware of your local authority, your local government's advice around coronavirus. You cannot shut yourself away from that. So if your local government, your local authority is advising you to stay at home, then make sure you're updated with that and you stay at home. If they're advising that you go out with a mask, then make sure you wear a mask. If they're advising you to make sure you're wearing gloves or some protective equipment, then make sure you do that. So you need to be updated with the updated advice from your local government and what the international advice is around that. All right, fine. So we crack on with that. Please continue to send your questions. We again only have 10 more minutes. It's been very useful for me to also sit down here, go through a session of what you can do, what will be useful, and also then hear your questions, and then also try and find a way to answer them. Another question has just come through. Please make sure you're sending your questions through, and we want to make sure it's streaming again live and we're not having any connectivity problem there, and there isn't. So one question is, physical activity is great. What if someone has COVID-19 and in fruits and vegetables, what can we do? And does it says something around, doesn't fruits and vegetables, what can we do? I'm assuming again they're saying if someone has COVID-19 and they don't like fruits and vegetables, something on those lines. So physical activity again is great, as we said. The physical activity, as we explained earlier on, does not need to be a 5-kilometer run, and does not need to be going through specific fancy gyms. You can follow certain routines within your home environment. If you are someone who did exercise regularly, you would know various things to do within your home environment. If not, if you didn't do exercise regularly, maybe this is a time to pick up the pace very slowly and start looking at doing exercising. It'll give you a breath of fresh air from your daily routine. But also when you exercise, there's evidence around it. When you exercise and you engage in physical activity, it releases endorphins in your body, which in itself is a calming neurochemical, and it helps people to relax a bit. And when you relax, then you focus on things a bit more. If you don't like fruits and vegetables, and I'm assuming that is the question. If that is not the question, please send it through again. If you don't like fruits and vegetables, then I guess it's for you to see what is the best way you can keep a healthy diet. A healthy diet is a balanced diet. A balanced diet of carbohydrate, proteins and fats, and you're having the right amount. You're having the right portions and you're having the right amount. You want to ensure that all this is being done to make sure that you continue to live or engage in some sort of healthy lifestyle. So exercise, healthy diet is all part of that. Make sure you drink lots of fluids as well. That's also very important. Staying at home, you might forget having enough fluids. And if you are getting enough fluids, if you're getting enough fluids, that's great. If not, make sure you're aware of that. And with that, I think we are almost coming to an end of our session. It's been great sitting here and talking to you. I hope you found it useful. We're all living through very challenging times. I would very strongly advise you to make sure you look after yourself, look after your loved ones. We're all missing everyone else. We will get over this, inshallah. We will survive this. We will come through this in a victorious manner. Make sure you hang in there. Make sure you keep your focus. And in the moments of most despair, make sure you believe in the positives. Those who find spiritual healing as useful, hang on to it. Some people find religion very useful at this point in time, and they take examples from various religious stories in the holy books. For example, for us in the Quran, you find stories about a prophet being stuck in the stomach of a whale, and the most desperate, isolated moment, he still kept his faith in God. So keep your faith there, stay safe, and stay healthy. Thank you very much.